During the day, I worked at my regular job, but in the evenings, I rode my bicycle to deliver pizza. Even though the gig only lasted for a few hours on average, that particular night really screwed with my head. I received an order to deliver to a location that was a little off the beaten path a few months ago. It was one of those situations where I had to pedal my way to the edge of town where the street abruptly came to an end next to a dark, ominous forest. I'll tell you right now that it wasn't the kind of place you wanted to be after dark. I received the order details, which were a little odd. Go through the gate to the front door and walk to the kitchen, said the instructions. I concurred. It seemed simple enough. When I arrived, the house appeared to have been there from the beginning of time. Although there were some creepy vibes present, the pizza needed to be delivered. Something in the window caught my attention as I approached the house. The movement resembled a shadow and vanished in an instant. Considering it to be a trick of my eyes, I ignored it. I shrugged it off and walked to the gate. It was already ajar, so I just had to push it open. Then, I opened the creepy front door that beeped like something out of a horror movie. It appeared to be empty for a brief period because the interior was completely dark. But that shadow thing, that's when things started to get strange. Nobody answered when I yelled, "Hello? Are you home?" Only my own voice could be heard in the darkness. But there was an issue. I was clinging to that pizza box like it was my lifeline, even though my gut told me this wasn't right. I moved forward in silence, moving down that lengthy, eerie hallway. I assumed the kitchen was there because there was an open door. I walked through the door, and it was indeed the kitchen. I put down the pizza box and called once more to see if anyone was home. But again, no answer. Suddenly, I heard a loud bang of the front door slamming shut. With the pizza box left on the table, I almost jumped out of my skin. The hallway immediately caught my attention, but nobody was there. It seemed as though the wind was deceiving me. I rushed to the front door without stopping, my heart beating like a jackrabbit on steroids. I mounted my bike with a bound and pedaled furiously. Then, guess what? When I turned around, the shadowy figure at the window was still there. It was terrifying, but I couldn't really make out much else. I felt an adrenaline rush, and I pedaled back to tell my boss about what happened. I dragged my trembling self back to the pizza shop. He gave me the okay to go home for the night because I was as white as a ghost, but he was all, "Nothing actually happened, so let's not bother the cops, alright?" At home, the entire incident kept playing back in my head. I tossed and turned, trying to figure out if I had just met some spectral pizza enthusiast. I couldn't let it go after a few days had passed, so I made the decision to drive to that creepy house during the day. It appeared to be a typical house, nothing unusual, except that the light was on this time. I had to do something about it, so I parked and mustered up the courage to ring the doorbell. A lady answered the door shortly after, and she appeared completely normal. She had this perplexed expression on her face as I inquired about the recent pizza order. She claimed they didn't even order pizza. I rubbed my eyes in disbelief. She looked frightened as well after I revealed what had happened. We were both shivering as we stood there together. She claimed, though, that she wasn't even at home that night. Both of us were now terrified. My head was spinning like a top as I thanked her for her time and left the room. I was still as perplexed as ever, so here I am. I don't have any answers. All I have is a nagging suspicion that there is more to the world than meets the eye. What was that enigmatic figure? Who was playing a prank on me in that house? You can be sure that I'll think twice before making another delivery to the forest's edge. I used to work at a restaurant. Anything you wanted to order, we would prepare for you, no questions asked. The surprising part was that we also provided delivery service. And I don't mean the standard, everyday kind. No, we deliver the food to your doorstep, bells and whistles included. Particularly, as a result of the home delivery, the restaurant was well liked. Things changed for the worse one evening. We had a strict cutoff time in our kitchen of 10 p.m., and by 9:30, we were prepared to close it down for the evening. A new order came in just as we were about to finish. The request had been made, and this was going to be the night's big showdown. Consequently, I got ready, loaded up on goodies, and left. The address was a complete mystery. It was on a street I had never visited, one of those lonely lanes with a few scattered homes. The address didn't match any of the houses, which I discovered as I made my way. I made the decision to leave my car and conduct a brief investigation on foot. Despite my best efforts, there did not appear to be a house with the house number given. My phone jolted me out of my skin with a loud ring just as I was about to give up and go back. A voice pierced the strange silence on the other end and said, "Follow the lighted path behind the last house." I hesitantly replied, "Hello?" Before I could say anything, they hung up. The food bag became a lifeline for me as I stood there with a chill running down my spine. It appeared as though the evening had transformed into a horror film plot. But hey, I wasn't about to let some creepy caller ruin my delivery strategy. The only source of illumination on the entire street was the path, which beckoned to me from the shadows. I cautiously stepped onto it as my heart raced around in my chest. A small house with a man standing in front of it loomed at the path's end. It's odd, but I reasoned that he might be a hungry soul who was awaiting a meal. I crept up on him and took a close look because something about his demeanor screamed trouble. Then, he charged at me like a flaming arrow. My veins raced with panic, and I fled. Even the food didn't cross my mind, so I just dropped it. My car was parked a short distance away, and I had it in my sights. I caught a glimpse of his back and noticed that his eyes were blazing with an insane intent that gave me the chills. Fear was strongly tasted on my tongue as I jumped into my car and sped away. I anticipated seeing him chasing after me when I looked in the rearview mirror, but the street was strangely deserted. He didn't follow me. I skidded to a stop a safe distance away and collected my thoughts. I dismissed my imagination, attributing it to stress and adrenaline, and wondered what had just happened. Maybe the guy was just playing a weird prank to get free food. But that didn't matter to me. I wasn't going to risk my life for $20. I told my boss what had happened when I got back to the restaurant. Although equally perplexed as I was, he didn't dismiss it. He dialed the police's number and began to tell them the bizarre story of the failed delivery. The time before the arrival of the police dragged on like molasses. They received the rundown from us, including the incorrect address, the man at the door, and the hasty retreat. Skepticism and worry could both be seen on their faces. They said they would investigate, and I hoped they could solve this strange puzzle. Anxiety gnawed at me as the night went on. What if that guy was some kind of insane lunatic and wasn't just scrounging for a free meal? The tension was palpable when the police eventually made their way back. They claimed that the man was completely gone. There was only the food bag, which was unopened, lying there like a bent souvenir. I questioned whether I had actually stared into danger or if my mind was playing tricks on me because it seemed like the whole thing was a bad dream. It dawned on me suddenly, late at night, that guy wasn't looking for food. He had completely different goals in mind. An unsettling realization coursed through me as my stomach began to churn. It's possible that he was seeking me out for some evil motive. Moreover, I couldn't help but have the impression that whatever had happened that night was still very much in progress as the darkness outside seemed to draw in. Just over a year had passed since it happened, but the memory still sends a chill through my body, like a brisk winter wind. I was a delivery man for this Chinese restaurant once. We went through a fair share of peculiar things. It was us who braved the night to deliver those hot dishes up until 2 in the morning. Despite the long hours and mediocre pay, tips occasionally turned out to be gold. Things started to get a little creepy one night, or should I say morning. 6 spring rolls arrived with an order that didn't quite fit the usual rhythm of the restaurant, which wasn't exactly buzzing with activity. In the middle of the night, who orders 6 spring rolls, right? But hey, we weren't swamped, so the choice was to go with it. As a notice with the online order, there was the number 23. I initially scratched my head, wondering what this number might mean, but I quickly dismissed it, assuming it was some strange internal code or something. I assembled the spring rolls, hopped on my venerable bicycle, and pedaled towards the address through the streets that were now completely dark. I sensed that this delivery wouldn't be like the others as the wheels scuffed over the gravel. The address took me to a remote area outside of town where even the moonlight appeared wary of going. A dated hotel that appeared more like a relic of the past loomed in the distance. The dim light barely broke through the shadows, and almost all the windows were broken. The hotel really looked neglected from head to toe. Even though my stomach grumbled, I had bills to pay, so I mustered all of my courage and parked my bike. As I looked around, I understood that number 23 was actually a room number. As I made my way to the door, my heart was racing as the old floorboards squeaked under my feet. Every nerve in my body went into overdrive as I had the impression that something was watching me from the shadows. I walked through the corridor, a tunnel of unsettling silence, as though I was passing through a forgotten memory. After what felt like an eternity, I was at room 23. My fists beat against the wooden door, but then there was an agonizing silence. I knocked again, this time a little louder and sounding a little more desperate. Exactly the same. My composure started to erode as fear crept up on me. Just as I was about to bolt out of there, a quiet, raspy whisper shattered the silence. "Please enter." I could hardly hear the voice over the pounding in my chest, but it was there, chilling me to the core. I was holding the doorknob with my shaking hand. The door creaked open, engulfing the space in dusty darkness. I scanned the area with my eyes, but could see nothing but a single table covered in a thick layer of dust. My mind raced to solve the puzzle as uncertainty and confusion coexisted. I was baffled by what had uttered those words, where the customer was, and how it made sense. I eventually caved into the panic that was choking at my throat and pushing me to run away. Shutting the door behind me, I left the room as fast as I could. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that I had stumbled into something I couldn't understand when I got back to the restaurant. I snuck into the bathroom, pulling out my phone to investigate the address, but decided to keep the bizarre encounter to myself. After all, who would believe me? Real fear began to set in at that point. 5 whole years had passed since the hotel, that same dilapidated structure, had last operated. It was impossible for anyone to be in room 23. It felt as though my reality had become infused with a bad dream or nightmare. I consequently experienced a chill down my spine and an uncomfortable stomachache. I experienced a significant change that night in myself. When I closed my eyes at night, the image of that dust-covered room and that raspy whisper would resurface. I was unable to explain what I had seen. I still experienced that prickling sensation on the back of my neck whenever I pass by an old hotel. I left that delivery job soon after because I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something had followed me, something that defied logic and explanation. My hands are still trembling as I type this, and I have some doubts about whether I will ever fully recover from that terrifying experience, the night I delivered to room 23.